North Dakota has seen more than 20 years of successful homeschooling, and the second generation of homeschoolers is now carrying the torch with their children.
We've taken education out of the classroom to the kitchen table, as it were, and we've developed a rich lifestyle of learning that is, right when it comes right down to it, that's probably the reason why most of us enjoy homeschooling.
Not surprisingly to most of us, modern home education has worked far better than many regulators expected. But state statutes regarding homeschooling have remained virtually unchanged since their inception. Not so for our public school counterparts. As our nation invests billions of dollars every year into the public education system in an attempt to maintain international superiority, test-based accountability policies continue to evolve to this day. In the aftermath of the No Child Left Behind Act of 2002, every American state now administers some sort of standardized test every year. As a result of this act, most states have attached ever higher stakes to these tests to ensure compliance with federal requirements. These policies have generated a veritable firestorm of protest and research. North Dakota requires that standardized tests be given in grades 4, 6, 8, and 10. Research leaves very few questions about the effects of high-stakes tests in general. Even the most pro-public education researchers are raising a red flag about high-stakes tests. It's time homeschoolers had a closer look.
There's no correlation. Even though states are doing better on their own high-stakes tests, we're not seeing an increase in NAEP scores. And if we're hoping that we're going to see better progress by schools in general, as a matter of fact, the report showed that in the 2010-2011 school year, 48% of the nation's schools, like not just the bad schools, all the schools, failed to meet their adequate yearly progress benchmarks.
Not only are these policies not living up to expectations, newer research shows disturbing effects on teaching methods.
Certain types of instructional styles and learning styles are far more susceptible to these deleterious effects associated with high-stakes testing. Discussion groups, research projects, supervised activities, they were out. They were switching away from integrative active learning experience to this teacher-centered model, which is all about facts, it's about lecture, it's about direct instruction, it's about opening students' heads and pouring in knowledge. At the end of the year, they have a whole list of things in terms of their standards that have to be met. And so if you've got a student that falls behind or is somehow just not getting it, I'm sorry, you've got to get that information into them somehow. Teachers were claiming that they were forced to teach in ways that were totally developmentally inappropriate and inappropriately paced.
Many homeschoolers utilize methods that fall into a student-led or constructivist category, a category where high-stakes tests can have a particular effect.
Constructivist education methods tend to focus on intrinsic motivation. Intrinsically motivated students tend to enjoy learning for its own sake. Another way to talk about intrinsic motivation is that they have a love of learning. High-stakes test policies again and again have been shown that because of the central design of these tests that force comparison between students, both at an individual level and between districts and between states, will absolutely shift students away from a mastery, intrinsic motivation, oriented goal perspective to performance. And if they happen to not do very well on those tests, they'll actually shift into the avoidance performance category, and that's unacceptable.
Constructivist methods promote intrinsic motivation, a love of learning. High-stakes tests promote extrinsic motivation, a love of performing. A high-stakes test is any test that is a single defined assessment, has a clear line drawn between those who pass and those who fail, and has direct consequences for passing or failing.
If we score below the 30th percentile, you automatically have to go and get evaluated by a multidisciplinary team from your local school. That is terrifying to many homeschoolers. In our law, the purpose of taking these standardized achievement tests is to identify learning disabilities. We are trying to use that test to determine whether or not a child needs more help. Standardized achievement tests have ridiculously poor specificity. There are numerous reasons why a child might score low on a norm reference test. That type of pressure totally fits our characterization of high stakes tests, and it's not even accomplishing the goal that they have for it, because there are plenty of students that might actually have a legitimate learning disability that need some extra help that are going to score vastly higher than the 30th percentile.
Accountability policies that center on high-stakes tests are failing homeschoolers.
We think it's time to move beyond a blanket policy of high-stakes tests for homeschoolers in North Dakota and find alternatives that are actually helpful to these families. There's too much at stake, and we need to move on beyond this relic of test-based accountability.